Hello everybody, I'm Zenith variant GAY25, although my friends all call me Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and welcome once again to the Midnight Combo Pack, where it's Halloween all year round. This is the Haunted Gaming Library, where I will be sharing my stories of the many games that I have completed throughout the years. Although, for a bit of clarification, this won't be a show reserved exclusively for horror games or anything like that. It's just fun to darken the mood every now and again, especially when I'm a ghost myself. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that, didn't I? Ghost Bunny Zenith at your service, cataloging the midnight hours with video games. After all, ghosts don't need to sleep, especially when there is so much work to be done. In any case, join us as we take a look at two games I've completed recently in my backlog. Much like the first Midnight Combo Pack, today's theme is the past coming back to haunt me. But in this case, it's two franchises I haven't played in a while, rather than two games I need to complete. Today we're delving further back into the past as we take a look at the first entries for both Assassin's Creed and Darksiders. Assassin's Creed is a franchise that I have a massive history with, having bought the first entry as one of my first PlayStation 3 games. I was hooked on the franchise ever since, and have completed a large portion of the games in the series, buying each entry at launch, starting with the second game. With each new title, the overarching story gripped me even further, and the gameplay gradually improved. However, as it grew in popularity, the cracks began to show, with the series becoming a yearly franchise, leading to the issue of oversaturation. There was a period in 2014 when there were two mainline games released in the same year, not counting handheld games such as Assassin's Creed Liberation. This made the series feel extremely bloated, and I stopped playing it in 2013 with the release of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I was really starting to get burnt out on the series, especially after being disappointed by 3 and how they completely threw away large portions of the ongoing storyline. Darksiders, on the other hand, is a series I've always wanted to get into, but never really explored all that much. I played a large portion of the first game, but set it down for a bit after a difficult trophy, and never got back to it. However, I've always been fascinated by the franchise and how it continued to evolve and change even after the original developer went bankrupt and had to sell the property off. This is a series that changed hands a number of different times and has gone through many different iterations, yet still gets some great reviews from fans, and I've always been interested in checking it out at some point. It's one of those series that's on my ever-growing list of things to return to later down the line. With that being said, let's take a look back in time and see how well both of these games hold up. When it comes to Assassin's Creed, the popularity of the franchise may be misleading because despite having over 12 mainline games, 20 spin-off games for handheld and mobile devices, and a major motion picture, not many people have played the first Assassin's Creed. A large part of this is because Assassin's Creed 1 is the only game in the franchise to never be remastered or ported to modern consoles. It remains exclusive to the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, despite all of the other games in the franchise being remastered in other collections. They've all been consistently ported and remastered for other consoles, but the first, and arguably the most important entry in the franchise, remains shackled to the 7th console generation. It's baffling given the popularity of the series, but there are a few reasons for this. In many ways, the first Assassin's Creed is considered the black sheep of the franchise, referred to as non-essential by many fans. In fact, there are many people who recommend that you skip this entry entirely due to the rough edges of the game. The consensus by many is that it is an interesting experiment, but it's too experimental. They say the combat is too clunky, the gameplay is repetitive, the puppeteering mechanic is unintuitive, the protagonist is boring, and overall you should just start with Assassin's Creed 2, since that is leaps and bounds the better game. But after playing through Assassin's Creed 1 for the first time in 13 years, I think this game deserves a second look, because I believe it still holds up to this day and is damn impressive for its time. The first thing to understand when it comes to Assassin's Creed is that it wasn't a launch title for the system. The PS3 launched in 2006 with a less than stellar lineup. Resistance: Fall of Man, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and Untold Legends were the only real interesting games from the pitiful launch lineup. And even then, they were just fun time wasters. Nothing to really write home about. Even Call of Duty 3 wasn't impressive for the time, with the series only making big waves with Modern Warfare a year later. So, you have a console that has little to no games with any real staying power, along with an asking price of $599 US, or, as Phil is telling me right now as we speak, $1,000 in Australia.
What?
None of these games truly took advantage of the system. They were just holdovers from the PlayStation 2 with the same gameplay and design. The PlayStation 3 was supposed to be this big revolution with what it could do for gaming, but that didn't happen at launch. However, in late 2007, things started to change. We got Ratchet & Clank Future: Tools of Destruction in October, and in November of that year, we got Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which became the biggest multiplayer shooter of the decade and put the franchise on the map. That same month, Assassin's Creed was released. While I remember word of mouth on the game being good, the internet wasn't what it is today, and most of my information came from video game magazines back then. These were people who were paid to play, review, and highlight new games. The articles on Assassin's Creed showcased a lot of interesting points on the game, but the reviews were mixed. The general consensus was pretty mediocre from many gaming sources. Electronic Gaming Monthly famously gave the game a 58 out of 100, with Destructoid calling it disappointing and repetitive, filled with ridiculously long and unnecessary cutscenes. While Game Informer gave it a 9.5 out of 10, the sheer abundance of mixed reviews gave me pause at the time. I was still in high school, and $60 was a lot to pay for a game at launch. It wasn't until the rave reviews for Assassin's Creed 2 that I hopped onto the bandwagon, buying both games at the same time, and only really skimmed through the first game for the base story before diving into 2, which is a shame, since I think this is something that a lot of us did without thinking about what the first game was trying to accomplish. So let's travel back to the past and take another look at this game that was ghosted by so many people. Let's take a look at Assassin's Creed with fresh eyes and an open mind. Assassin's Creed was developed by Ubisoft Montreal, the same developers who brought us the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time trilogy, a set of games I'm very familiar with. The perception of Ubisoft was very different back then, given the successful franchises that they had helped create, such as Prince of Persia, Rayman, Beyond Good and Evil, and countless other notable games that were published by them. There was a lot of goodwill towards the company, which has unfortunately dried up lately due to the abuse allegations put against Ubisoft as a whole. There's a lot of nasty events that happen behind the scenes in video game development. We discussed EA last time with Dante, and Ubisoft is just as guilty, but of different horrible things. Side note, crunch is still not good. However, I'm not James Stephanie Sterling, and I'm not here to uncover the horrors behind the scenes of game development. I'm here to discuss the games themselves. With that being said, at the time, my friends and I were super excited for the next Prince of Persia, only to learn that there wasn't going to be a new entry for quite some time. Instead, we got Assassin's Creed, which was more a spiritual successor to Prince of Persia than anything else. In fact, Assassin's Creed started life as a Prince of Persia sequel, but when the 7th generation of consoles was announced, the developers realized that they could expand upon the game further. Instead of a linear approach, they could use the new hardware to instead bring the acrobatic gameplay of the series to an open world setting. The game began production under the working title Prince of Persia Assassin, and over time, game designer Patrice Désilets came up with the idea of the Animus, which would utilize time travel to allow them to explore numerous different cities and time periods for potential assassination targets, including fantastical ones such as John F. Kennedy.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, they seriously considered putting the JFK assassination in the game. This concept was wild. However, since management at Ubisoft weren't fully on board with the idea of the players controlling someone who wasn't the prince, it was decided to make the game an entirely new IP, which they then dubbed Assassin's Creed, tying in with the main theme of the game. The story of Assassin's Creed is a simple one on paper, but I think it's truly the presentation that sells it. Desmond Miles, a seemingly ordinary bartender, has been kidnapped by a company known as Abstergo. It is unclear at first just what Abstergo does, but one of his captors, Dr. Warren Vidic, explains that Abstergo is in the business of scientific breakthroughs and has been behind every single one of the past millennia, be it medical, mechanical, or philosophical. Abstergo needs Desmond in order to find yet another discovery through the use of an invention created by fellow captor Lucy Stillman. Her invention is known as the Animus, and it allows Desmond to relive the memories of his ancestors to find whatever it is that Vidic is looking for. The Animus is one of the most clever storytelling devices I've seen in video games because, much like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, it allows the player to experience any time period in any place in history. Admittedly, the science behind it is a bit far-fetched though, as the Animus is able to tap into genetic memory or the instinct of animals. For example, migration, hibernation, and reproduction are all instincts that animals just know how to do without being taught, which makes sense, but then Vidic goes on to say that this will allow Desmond to tap into the memories of his ancestors since he is a member of the Assassin Order and his ancestors' memories are stored in his genetic makeup. That doesn't even begin to add up, but it's a video game, so I'm just going to roll with it since it works as a storytelling device. Through the Animus, Desmond travels back to 1191 during the time of the Crusades and relives the memories of his ancestor Altair, a prominent member of the Assassin Order who makes a mistake during his latest assassination attempt. Due to his carelessness, arrogance, and lack of concern for loss of innocent life, Altair fails to take out his target, cripples a fellow assassin, and causes the death of another. He also leads their enemy, Robert de Sable, right to their doorstep, only just managing to take out his army through some clever tactics. Still, his mistake was costly, and Altair was demoted to the rank of a beginner, even though other members wished him to pay with his life. In order to redeem himself, regain his previous rank, and hopefully learn some humility in the process, Altair is tasked with 9 specific assassination targets that set the stage for the game. In this way, there are 2 stories taking place at the same time. In the present, we have the story of Desmond trying to figure out what Abstergo wants and how to either escape from them or take them out, and in the past, we have Altair's tale of redemption and growth as he learns what it truly means to be an assassin and the truth behind the cryptic nature of their creed. Every assassination brings us closer to understanding what Al-Mualim, the leader of the Assassin Order, is trying to teach Altair, and why these 9 men specifically need to die. The true crux of Assassin's Creed lies in the meaning behind these targets. As time goes by, Altair learns that all of these men are connected since they are all secretly Knights Templar. Normally, I wouldn't reveal this detail without a spoiler warning, considering the game goes to great lengths to conceal the existence of the Templar as one of the game's core mysteries, but that is only the case in this game. From here on out, the battle between the Assassins and the Templar forms the backbone of the series, so I don't consider it that much of a spoiler at this point. I will, however, keep any other spoilers under wraps for the time being. In any case, the reveal of the Knights Templar is heavily tied to the assassinations themselves. Every time you take out a target, you are rewarded with a rather strange cutscene of the target explaining their motivation and the goals behind their actions. The scenes themselves are actually quite interesting as they attempt to justify their actions, but they are all told while the target is bleeding out as they have just been stabbed in the neck by the hidden blade. I do have a theory for how this is happening, but I'll save it for the eventual should you complete this episode. It's just rather weird how long it takes for these people to die, or in one case, survive after being stabbed in the neck. Video games, everybody!
A scratch? Your arm's off! No, it isn't. Well, what's that then? I've heard worse.
What is important is what these targets have to say. Every single one of them claims that their crimes are done in the service of a noble purpose, and state that Altair's actions are dooming the kingdoms that he's trying to save. The goal of the Assassin Order is peace in all things, but every single Templar claims that Altair is doing the opposite. This brings us to the creed of the Assassins. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. Initially, Altair took this to believe that this gives him the freedom to do as he chooses, regardless of the nature of his actions, and that it does not matter how they take out their enemy, but that it is done. He saw the creed as guidelines, really, and considered himself above the creed itself. However, as he goes through his journey to redemption, He sees the Templars using the same reasoning to justify horrible actions, like a slaver who claims that he's saving those he enslaves by giving them a chance to work when they had nothing before. While we clearly see the effect these men have is harming the very people they are trying to save, their words cause doubt in Altair and lead him to discover the true meaning of the creed. Nothing is true and everything is permitted means that every person has his own truth. We must learn for ourselves what is true and constantly question our actions and our means so that we know that we are on the correct path. Laws arise not from divinity, but from reason, and the creed commands the assassins not to be free to do whatever they please, but to have the wisdom to create peace without using immoral or unethical means. You see, the Templars also wish for peace, but their tactics are through order and control, while the assassins wish for knowledge and freedom. The conflict is one of means, and the path Altair was on would have led him to become just like the Templars, but with the wisdom of his own truth. He realizes that the ends do not justify the means, and that in order to create true peace, one must have peace within themselves. This is why I love the story of Assassin's Creed. It is very minimalist, but it is very deep, well written, and hits hard. It's a story of morality and truth, urging the player to take the same journey as Altair, which is conveyed wonderfully through the presentation. The game begins by telling you where to go, who to kill, and why they need to die. However, this changes drastically as you progress. After the first 3 targets, you don't immediately get told where to go next until you find the first viewpoint and have to figure out what the target did based on the side missions scattered in the district of the city. In later chapters, you only learn small bits from the side missions and have to find out from the target themselves why they need to die. In this way, we truly step into the shoes of Altair and observe the events for ourselves. For example, we can clearly see the class divide after the first 3 targets because the rich district is vastly different from the poor district. The guards take no notice as we are attacked by drunks and lobotomites, only taking notice if we do something to upset them, and they do not extend any help to the poor of the city, leaving beggars to run rampant through the streets, asking anyone who will listen for money for their sick and dying families. The game chooses to show instead of tell with its story, something that not many video games did back then. As Altair, we observe the discord in each district and the chaos that the Templars create. I honestly think this was what the PS3 was created to do. While the PS2 was incredibly popular and had some amazing games, they were created with gameplay as the focus. They were meant to be played first and foremost. However, many of the developers during the PS3 era were trying to step away from that and focus on storytelling and immersion, and Assassin's Creed is all about that immersion. For instance, the heads-up display in many PS2 games took up a large portion of the screen, and you weren't supposed to question the realism of the game. One of my big examples is how Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time feels very unrealistic in the level design because the traps and defense systems make no sense in a real-world context. But it's still an amazing game to play, so you suspend your disbelief. In Assassin's Creed, the focus was fully on immersion, where things were slowed down and you were meant to experience this world methodically as the character. One of the ways they went about this was shrinking the heads-up display to only the bare minimum and putting it to the edges of the screen so that it wasn't the focus of the shot. Though, funny enough, the initial idea was to get rid of the heads-up display altogether, and Assassin's Creed 1 is the only game in the series where you can actually toggle it on and off and play without a map or a health bar throughout the entire game. And it really does work, since from the moment you take control of Desmond, I was completely engrossed in this world and these characters. Granted, I do wish there were subtitle options, since I always like to make sure I fully understand the story beats, but the immersion took hold so damn quick, and I applaud this game for that. This is a game fully designed to be a playable film in many aspects, and it is meant to be played in that same fashion. Unlike the fast-paced platforming action of Prince of Persia, Assassin's Creed is meant to be experienced slowly as you take everything in, and not many people approach the game this way. The control scheme is experimental to be sure, and not exactly fluid, but much like Shadow of the Colossus, I feel that it becomes intuitive once you get used to it. Assassin's Creed 1 uses a puppeteering mechanic as the main control scheme. The triangle button controls vision-based actions, circle is the empty hand, square is your sword hand, and X corresponds to your legs. At first, this seems a bit clunky, but that's because I don't feel the tutorial of the game does a great job explaining the subtle nuances of the controls, possibly to further immerse you into the role of Altair. The truth is, everything is context sensitive, and that opens up so many different possibilities. You will get different results based on whether you press a button or hold a button, but that's just base actions. Everything has different profiles as well. There are low profile actions, such as blend, allowing you to remain in low profile, or you can just press circle to gently push people aside. There are normal actions such as regular walking and climbing, and medium profile actions to run or make your horse move faster. Then there are high profile actions by holding R1 the entire time and pressing one of the puppeteering buttons. The sheer amount of possibilities is crazy, and once you get a handle on what actions you want to do, you can find yourself free running around the city in no time and easily avoiding guards by blending into the environment. This is a control scheme that feels very clunky at first, but as soon as you know what you're doing, it's almost second nature. Sure, the AI on the guards could be better, since sometimes they just are alerted for no reason, but I had far less trouble this time around knowing that my actions were context-based. The same is true of combat. Initially, I was rather unimpressed with it because most of the upgrades were locked away and it felt like there wasn't really much to it. However, as you unlock new moves, that context sensitivity comes into play yet again. This combat is designed for multiple opponents at once, and it's all about watching and waiting for the right time to strike. You could attack now and risk being attacked from behind, or you could dodge an enemy attack and use that opening to attack a second enemy, or you could counterattack and kill them that way. I know a lot of people just use the counter kill maneuver, but there's also grab breaks and other mechanics that you can do that help, especially later on in the game when enemies will dodge your attacks, and it's best to switch up your tactics, especially late in the game. You could switch to throwing knives, or you could start a fight with the hidden blade and switch up to lower the enemy ranks. There's a lot of variety for only a few weapon types, and while this isn't highlighted well in the game itself, once I started switching up my tactics, I had a lot more fun in combat. This is especially important for the final portions of the game, where you have to fight hordes of enemies, where the theme of one person's truth versus all others comes into play, as it is one man versus so many enemies, and the AI gets really challenging. Some people may find this frustrating, but I actually enjoyed the challenge because it truly puts your skills of observation and timing to the test. Knowing when to strike and counter is key here, and I think it truly brings the themes and ideas of the game into one solid finale. The only combat sections I found truly annoying from start to finish were stealth assassinations, which don't always work very well. Part of it is the guards being able to detect your presence fairly easily, which does make a certain amount of sense since you are wearing the assassin colors and Templars can easily spot this, but it does get annoying because this is a game about assassins. The fact that most of the Templar targets will notice you on sight does feel a bit contrary to the message of the game, and I do wish the game took advantage of stealth tactics rather than having Templars somehow see me up in the rafters just because. I did manage to stealth assassinate around half of the targets, but it's still a problem that I was annoyed with throughout the game. The same is true of the stealth assassination side missions, which are better handled since the targets don't immediately figure out who you are on sight, but they are timed, and that was frustrating because the focus should be on stealth, not speed. I had to redo several of these segments simply because I was afraid of the clock and got found out when I should have been focused on silently taking them out one by one like in Hitman.
Everything is fine. Stop being infected!
Still, even with these problems, I found this game truly enjoyable and found myself liking it far more than I did the first time through. At the end of the day, I believe that Assassin's Creed is a misunderstood gem of a game. Are there problems in the game? Most definitely. The AI can be annoying at times, especially with the drunks just fighting you because and getting in your way for no reason, or the beggars interrupting your pickpocketing, or those times guards jumped off a roof to get me and accidentally broke their own legs, so I got away safely. The controls can be a bit clunky at first if you aren't used to them, and it can be a bit repetitive when clearing each district. However, I think that matters very little when it comes to the strengths of this game. The story is incredibly immersive, deep, and engaging, forcing you to think for yourself with show don't tell being at the forefront of the narrative. Altair may not be the most engaging of protagonists acting-wise, but his story of redemption is a really compelling one, and by the end, I really started to feel for him as a character. The same can be said of Desmond, who I liked from the very beginning, but as you learn more about him and his past, I grew to like him even more. Vidic is a wonderful villain who truly believes what he is doing is just, and I found every bit of his dialogue compelling and engaging. I never found myself bored with the game and ended up going the extra mile and completing every single side mission and additional memory, including finding every single flag and killing all of the additional Templars in every city for 100% completion. Many people have told me that this would be tedious, but I didn't think so at all. Taking the time to collect the flags actually broke up the repetition of the memory blocks, taking away one of the big problems that people always bring up in relation to the game. Essentially, I would go through each memory in the same fashion. I'd hit all the story beats, find all the viewpoints, and save all the citizens in each district. Then I'd find all the flags and Templars, take them all out, and continue with the side missions, and end with taking out the targets of each block. Then I'd take a brief break before returning to the game. Assassin's Creed 1 is structured in memory blocks, and much like handheld games, this allowed me to play in sessions without getting bored or exhausted from the game. Once a city or district was completed, I could take a short break, and in that way, the game never felt repetitive to me. As for the flags and Templars, I didn't have any issue with it since I had a very good location guide on hand, and it allowed me to appreciate the architecture of these cities much longer. Ubisoft Montreal put so damn much effort into the historical accuracy of the look and feel of each city, and the detail is damn impressive, especially for the time period. I mean, Infamous came out in 2009 and looks far less detailed and much worse. Yes, there are issues of pop-in and screen tearing at times, and when the cutscenes show character models up close, it does degrade in quality a bit, but the level of detail for the majority of the game is simply gorgeous, to the point where climbing every bit of the landscape was a delight when going for all the flags. Hell, the main kingdom area gets so much more focus when you go for all the flags, since otherwise it's just an area you ride through like Hyrule Field, but when you go for the flags and Templars, you truly get to appreciate the detail and get further immersed in the world of the game. I was incredibly impressed with how well this held up, and I remember not being very fond of it when I first played it. During this playthrough, I set aside any preconceived notions and just played through the game, and I left feeling wholly satisfied. In the end, I give this game the midnight stamp of approval. There are so many people who slept on this game, and I think it deserves another look. Give the game a chance to truly immerse you and get used to the controls, and I think that you will have a wonderful time.
This earth is finished. Demons shall inherit it. Angels shall be cast down. And the only one with the power to restore the shattered world is the one who began its destruction. All who wage war know my name. Darksiders, rated M for mature.
Darksiders is a series I know next to nothing about, since it has stayed under the radar for the most part, but I have several friends and followers who absolutely love the franchise. When they heard I was going to be playing the first game for Midnight Combo Pack, they were extremely excited and sent tons of responses to my live tweets about the game. Well, I'm a ghost, so I guess they'd be undead tweets, which is fitting for the game. Darksiders was developed by Vigil Games in 2010 and published by THQ, two companies that are sadly no longer with us. I will get to the THQ debacle in a future video, but most of their properties were sold to other companies when they went bankrupt, so this game is technically undead as well, since it has survived long after the original developers and publishers dissolved. Back in 2010, however, THQ was doing pretty well for themselves with franchises such as Destroy All Humans, The Blob, Saints Row, and the WWE SmackDown vs. Raw titles. Trust me, the latter shows in this game. Thankfully, many of these have since been rescued and remastered, so I will be able to talk about them on the show in the future. Vigil Games, on the other hand, was a relatively new studio, starting life in 2005, and only have Darksiders 1 and 2 under their belt, although they were working on a Warhammer 40k game at the time they announced bankruptcy. Unfortunately, while THQ properties were auctioned off, Vigil received no bids and had to be completely dissolved. Thankfully, many of the key developers have been hired by successful companies such as Retro Studios and Gunfire Games. Gunfire Games was later acquired by Nordic Studios, who purchased the rights to Darksiders and changed their name to THQ Nordic, so Darksiders shambles on even if the original team isn't still on board. It is sad that things turned out this way, but I am at least happy that many of the developers have gone on to other projects. On my end, I believe I first heard about the game from Game Informer, but I can't find any preview articles, so that might be my memory playing tricks on me, because my memory does that sometimes. I do remember watching Yahtzee's review of the game, and despite the negativity of the review, I ended up getting it since I was intrigued by the concept. I bought a used copy of the Greatest Hits edition for only $17, but even still it was in fantastic condition, and this was a great deal. I think I got it at GameStop during their buy two get one free events, which was always a tradition for me. I'd go in and get around 6 to 12 games for $100 with Thanksgiving money that I would normally wait to buy otherwise. I played through the first few levels of Darksiders and do remember enjoying myself, but I was easily distracted when I was younger and put the game down after a tough trophy to work on another game and just never picked it back up. While not many people discuss Darksiders, especially today, I have a lot of friends who really love the game, and I am happy to finally give them what they want from my show. So, with that being said, let's dive into Darksiders and see how well it holds up today. How would one best describe Darksiders as a video game? Well, what if I told you they took the overly detailed character models from World of Warcraft, complete with battle armor, placed them into the setting of Diablo during the apocalypse, gave it the combat of God of War and Devil May Cry, the puzzles and dungeons of Zelda, the weapon leveling mechanics of Ratchet & Clank, Metroidvania-style platforming and progression, and the ability to pick up tons of everyday objects and use them as weapons from Dead Rising 2. Then, they took all of these ideas and put it into one game with Power Rangers voice actors in the mix, the Joker as your sidekick, and plenty of other recognizable voice actors who play characters with their own agendas and agency while still being incredibly funny. That, my buns, is Darksiders. It is a mishmash of different concepts and ideas that you wouldn't think would work well together, but somehow coalesces into something quite unique. That, to me, is the key difference between this and the first Assassin's Creed. They're both games that flew under the radar for many people, and have detractors saying that they aren't the greatest games ever made. But Assassin's Creed had a clear vision in mind. Desolé knew from the beginning what he wanted to create, and that shows with the outlandish concept that was way ahead of its time. Darksiders, though? Darksiders was the end result of a bunch of different ideas being thrown across the room and figuring out which ones worked best. Joe Madureira, creative director at Vigil Games, explained that they knew they wanted to make an action-adventure game, but when they were brainstorming ideas, they didn't like any of the stuff they were coming up with. None of the ideas really stuck, but then, after one meeting, Joe was driving home when he randomly came up with an idea of modern college students finding out they were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and fighting a war between heaven and hell.
Dick! Balls! Pussy! Ass!
He pitched the idea to his team, who loved it, albeit cutting out the buildup of the college students and just focusing on the war between heaven and hell. So, while Assassin's Creed was a clear idea from the beginning, Darksiders was created from bouncing a bunch of different ideas at the team and ironing out which ideas they liked best.
The cool thing about Darksiders is that it looks like the most crazy over-the-top combat game on the surface, but really, at its core, it's an adventure game. So we really merged these two elements together to create a new game. It's got like all the cinematic action of the best combat games with the, just exploration, puzzle solving.
The main story of Darksiders revolves around War, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse who is summoned to end the conflict between heaven and hell. Since the beginning of time, the kingdoms of heaven and hell have warred, with neither side gaining an advantage over the other. Thus, in time, a mediator group known as the Charred Council arose to maintain order and harmony. They created a warrior brotherhood, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, to intervene and enforce their rules where and whenever necessary. Amidst the conflict, humans emerged, and foreseeing that they would be integral to the balance's stability, the council declared them a third kingdom, the Kingdom of Man. The council then brokered a truce between heaven and hell, and 7 mystical seals were created to be broken when the Kingdom of Man was strong enough to participate in the End War, a battle that would bring about balance and an end to the conflict. The game begins with the conceit that the End War has begun and the final seal broken. The forces of heaven and hell invade the Kingdom of Man, and it is up to War to stop it. However, not all is as it seems, as War starts to lose his powers and realizes the rest of the horsemen haven't arrived to bring about the End War. Even Abaddon, the general of Heaven's army, senses something is amiss, stating that the final seal has not been broken, as he is killed by the demon commander Straga. War desperately tries to take down this demon, but his powers are fully drained, and he wakes up 100 years later in front of the Charred Council. War is put on trial by the council, who claim that all of the seals are still intact and the call was not made for the horsemen to appear. They accuse War of disturbing the balance by siding with the forces of hell and starting the apocalypse prematurely, resulting in the total extinction of mankind. With the Third Kingdom destroyed, Earth has been transformed into a wasteland where angels and demons have begun the war anew. Led by a monster known as the Destroyer, the armies of hell have devastated what remains of the angelic forces and taken control of the earth. The council are naturally furious at this outcome and are prepared to kill War for this crime, but War insists that there was a call and that he is innocent of any wrongdoing, demanding a chance to prove his innocence and find the real culprits responsible for these crimes. They acquiesce to his request, but they strip him of his former powers and shackle him to the Watcher, one of their servants who is permitted to kill War if he strays from his mission or disobeys the council. War is returned to Earth, finding nothing but ruins where great cities once stood. What remains of Heaven's armies have been stranded on Earth and formed a meager resistance known as the Hellguard, led by Abaddon's former lieutenant, Uriel. Demons roam the land, searching for souls to devour, while the decaying husks of humans shamble around, transformed into ghouls by demonic power. It is up to War to restore his power, defeat the forces of hell, and bring balance to the world once more. He seeks the help of a demon known as Vulgrim, who sells equipment and knowledge for souls and guides us to Samael, another demon who has been imprisoned by the Destroyer. Samael knows of a way to defeat him. However, in order to reach his lair, the Black Tower, he must first kill 4 demons who guard it and bring their still beating hearts back to Samael. Only then will he gain access to the tower and the power to take down the Destroyer. From here, the game goes into full Zelda mode as you head to the lair of each demon, solve the puzzles in their dungeons, and gain the equipment necessary to teach these demons not to pick a fight with the horseman of the apocalypse. The story is full of twists and turns that kept me guessing until the very end of the game who is telling the truth and who is the mastermind behind this entire conspiracy. The key component in this story is the element of manipulation. While most of the characters are perfectly happy to help you out on your journey, none of them appear very trustworthy, and all of them have their own agendas. It is impossible to tell if any of them are telling you the truth or just using you for their own gain, so War has to be very careful not to give away too much information. At the same time, the more we learn about the conspiracy, the more questions form in our minds. It is a fully layered tale full of hidden agendas, betrayal, and subtle manipulation that really had me engaged throughout. Even when some twists seem obvious at first, they throw a wrench in the works to make you rethink the entire thing. Much like Assassin's Creed, the story is focused on finding your own truth instead of blindly obeying those in charge and carrying out their will. This is an exceedingly well-crafted plot, and I'd highly recommend Darksiders just for the story alone. One thing I really appreciate is how careful they were when adapting the religious text. One major thing that Joe stated was that while they researched up on Christianity and the Book of Revelations for the game, a lot of it was over the top and dark and wouldn't translate well into a game. They decided to take the core concepts of Revelations but make them more accessible for anyone who just wanted a fun experience. This, to me, is one of the major differences between Dante's Inferno and Darksiders. Much like Dante, Darksiders is often cited as a God of War clone, but there is a very clear difference in presentation. God of War was themed around rage, and that's why there was all that blood and violence. Dante's Inferno missed that theme, and instead dialed up the blood and gore and gruesomeness, believing that to be the key to success. However, it comes across as desperate, and this edgelord aesthetic turned me off the game because it's not very accessible to an average audience who doesn't like gore.
I'm gonna kill Praxis!
Darksiders, on the other hand, is themed around justice and revenge. War doesn't kill because he wants to. He kills demons and undead humans in order to bring about balance and restore his good name. He wants to serve the council, and he isn't desperately trying to act dark and edgy like Dante usually does. Darksiders is a game that knows it's cool and doesn't constantly feel the need to say it like Dante does. Much like Diablo, Darksiders takes something familiar and expands upon it in interesting ways, to the point that I am very interested in seeing where the story goes in future games. The impact of the story is further enhanced by the colorful cast of characters and their voice actors. Fulgrim the shopkeeper, played by Phil Lamar, who you may recognize as Jon Stewart, the Green Lantern, is an absolute delight. He is just so deliciously evil that I can't get enough of him. Everything he says is an instant treasure because of the cadence that Lamar gives him, emphasizing every other word and cackling with glee. I also want to give special attention to the Watcher, voiced by Mark Hamill, in one of my favorite roles he's ever done. The Watcher serves as a tutorial for new players, a hint system if you get stuck, and a constant source of amusement since he's always cackling and reminding War not to forget that he is a dog and the Watcher holds the leash. I think this is a very different role for Hamill, since while he does show evil tones and Joker personality and laughter, he remains more of a neutral party in this conflict. He doesn't support heaven or hell, and his role is to preserve the balance, so you have scenes where he expresses glee at Tiamat's heart being ripped out, but also is against War's pact with Samael. It's very interesting and something I enjoyed throughout the game, even though he's not really a major character, but a casual observer telling you what to do. War, on the other hand, is the driving force of the game. His entire character arc is about learning the true meaning of justice and why he is fighting in the first place. He starts off as a loyal pawn of the Charred Council, but as time goes on, he sees that he's being manipulated by everyone around him, and he doesn't just go along with it. He questions the Council, Samael, and the Watcher numerous times throughout the course of the game in order to find the truth, and the twists lead him to being a more independent person. He doesn't want to fight against Heaven and spares Uriel several times when he could have just killed her. He doesn't delight in killing demons, but he does his duty, and when everyone seems against him, he finds his own path that results in the fewest people needing to pay for their crimes. War is voiced by Liam O'Brien, who you may recognize as Caius Ballad in Final Fantasy XIII-2, Akihiko in Persona 3, and Gaara in Naruto. He is an extremely talented voice actor, and I've loved much of his work in the past. War is reserved, speaking very carefully to everyone he meets, because he's supposed to serve as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. His purpose is to deliver judgment to those who wrong the council, and that forces him to appear detached from his emotions in order to be fair and balanced. However, in this performance, I can see the emotion lying just beneath the surface. I can see exactly how each event affects War, even if he tries not to show it. He's not power hungry like Ares was in God of War, and he isn't cocky like in Percy Jackson. War has seen many battles without reveling in them. He feels the weight of the wars, and that shows in this performance. While the rest of the cast are all well developed, I can't go into it here too much without spoilers because a lot of the characters are tied to the plot. I can't think of any role I've disliked Troy Baker in, and this is no exception. He brings so much conviction to Abaddon, and I like the character from the start because of his voice. Then we have the blacksmith Ulthane, voiced by JB Blank, who hams it up throughout the game with a Scottish accent that I simply can't get enough of because of how fun he is to watch. When it comes to the character models, I'll admit that yes, they are over-designed, but they are meant to evoke the same feeling as World of Warcraft. These are warriors with a plethora of gear, which is evident when you slice the armor off skeletons piece by piece. Every bit of gear matters to War, and that thematic importance shows in his design. He is a hulking beast of a man with an assortment of armor that gradually gets beefed up over time, behaving like a walking arsenal. I also have to applaud the game for its graphical fidelity and use of color, since while there may be times where the game struggles to run on the PS3, it doesn't stop it from looking astonishingly detailed, colorful, and beautiful. With so many over-designed characters, the problem isn't simply the abundance of detail, but the colors blending in with one another. This isn't the case with War. He is visually striking, even from a distance, with his red hood and cloak as a base color balanced against the silver of his outer armor, the white of his hair and glowing eyes, the orange symbol on his forehead, and the gold of his shoulder guard and belts. None of these colors clash against each other, and they are distinguishable from a distance. Additionally, his sword can be slotted with a rune that makes it glow another contrasting color, such as purple or green. I personally love his design, and the rest of the characters work just as well for me. That just leaves the physics and the gameplay, which seems to be a major sticking point for some people. And I'll admit, the former is perhaps my own main issue with the game. It may make sense for War to drop like a sack of hammers because of his size, but it also makes the beginning rather awkward to control, and it makes the physics-based puzzles annoying in some places as a result. However, this is only taking into account the very beginning of the game, as this design was done intentionally. War's abilities grow over time, as he's meant to feel weak and frail in the beginning of the game due to the council taking away his power. It makes sense thematically because he's not supposed to feel strong enough yet, and even in the tutorial, he's growing weaker out of nowhere. On the other hand, this is still the very beginning of the game, and for many people, including myself, this is the stage where you're meant to justify why we should stick around to see what the game has to offer. And that's why I dropped the game on my first playthrough. I stopped playing because I thought the combat and platforming were clunky as heck, and the trophy for the on-rail section was hell to complete. However, if you can get past that initial segment and make your way to the first dungeon, you'll find a much different game. The combat improves tremendously as you give souls to Vulgrim and in return gain spells and items to help you through the game, as well as new attack upgrades, which is something I don't think many people focus on when they review this game. Fully maxing out skills for War's sword turns him into a weapon of mass destruction and opens up so many new tactics that you initially don't have. Much like Assassin's Creed, the combos and button presses are context sensitive, so holding a button does something different than pressing it, and the timing of your button presses is a significant factor. You go from basic attacks to DMC aerial and ground combos in no time, and that's just using your base weapon. You can purchase a Grim Reaper Scythe for lighter, quicker attacks, which can also be upgraded, along with a gauntlet you find later on that absolutely oozes power, even though it's slow as hell. You can switch between main weapons and sub-weapons with a press of a button, allowing for fluid combos that depend on what you want to accomplish in combat. There's a ton of variety to the combat, and it gets better when you realize that weapons power up from continued use, like in Ratchet & Clank, meaning you get stronger the more you put into the game. There's also a versatile blocking and dodging mechanic that can be used for counterattacks, where you can either parry when standing still for a very strong counter, or dodge and strike for a swift counter. There are many concepts that combine the best of Devil May Cry and God of War to create a coherent whole, and I wholly enjoy this combat. So yeah, the combat is pretty great, and luckily, the platforming also improves as time goes on. As you traverse through the well-designed dungeons, which have diversity in each section, even if they may be longer than typical Zelda affairs, you come across items that will aid War in his quest. These range from a giant shuriken that puts Naruto to shame, a chain whip that can grab enemies and be used as a grappling hook, which is awesome, and a gun that activates portals much like Valve's hit franchise. The items add so much to the platforming, not only making traversal easier, but aiding in combat and puzzles to an extent that Zelda doesn't quite reach. This is by nature a Metroidvania, but every item has multiple uses in and out of combat. Then there's the powers that Samael gives you, including abilities that let you glide, making the previous problems irrelevant. The only time where platforming and combat presented an issue was the first couple hours and during the Black Throne dungeon. Now, I initially thought this dungeon was poorly designed, but that was based on my first impression of the portal gun. No, it's not a gun that fires portals, but a gauntlet that activates a portal on a specific pad. So you place both portals and use the physics to get through the dungeon. At first, I hated using it here because I was so used to the Valve physics and didn't fully understand the difference between the physics of the games. However, once I realized that charging the portal longer drags you in faster for more height and acceleration, I realized my problem. I was viewing this as a one-to-one recreation of the portal gun, despite it having numerous different physics that must be utilized. As soon as I realized my mistake, I was able to operate it properly and fall in love with the Black Throne. This dungeon has some of the most clever puzzles I've ever seen in a video game, and while it may be incredibly long, I felt accomplished in completing it all without a guide. Honestly, I feel as if Darksiders was designed to play with your expectations. It combines all these familiar ideas and genres together and tricks you into thinking they behave the same way that they always do, only to find that they handle differently in this world, and once you get used to it, it flows like water. It's really hard to go back to my initial mindset back in 2012, as that feels like a completely different experience after replaying this game. At the time of this writing, I'm going through hard mode, zipping through the dungeons, flowing through the combos, and decimating bosses that gave me trouble before. Everything in this game is a puzzle. The combat, the mechanics, the boss fights. It expects you to go about it the wrong way before giving you the tools to be a badass. Another reason I grew attached to Darksiders, however, was due to something I had previously missed. You can pick up just about every object that's not nailed down and use it to destroy demons like in Dead Rising. Yeah, I had no idea this was a thing in 2012, but once I learned about it this time around, I just had a blast with it. You can grab lampposts, parking meters, mailboxes, and road signs and just bash in demon faces with them. You can find desks and cars and just toss them at undead forces for a laugh. And my personal favorite you can pick up tables and chairs and pretend this is AEW, all while you clobber fallen angels, with the Joker doing commentary rancic from Power Rangers, egging you on to rip their hearts out, Green Lantern wanting you to give him more souls for upgrades, all while Sajin Komamura yells at you in a Scottish accent to pluck some pigeons. This is a freaking wrestling game in disguise, and I am absolutely here for it. War may not have been around during the S movement, but he is the very embodiment of that underdog energy. He draws the power of positivity and uses it to curb stomp heels, looking good while doing so. Vigil Games wasn't creating a game about heaven and hell. No, they were making a game about the best wrestler known to man.
This is such good shit.
With all of that being said, Darksiders is not a perfect game. Much like Assassin's Creed, it has flaws that hold it back, but I truly believe it is well worth your time. It may get off to a rough start, but if you give it a chance to grow, get used to the controls, and allow yourself to become absorbed in the gleeful fun of the wrestling style destruction, you'll see just how good it is. It combines a deep and engaging story with over-the-top characters, clever dungeons, rewarding combat, and insanely fun gameplay. The core parts of this game are completely my jam. I don't think everyone will be able to get behind it, but for my money, Darksiders gets the midnight stamp of approval because it is worth at least one playthrough, and it made this bun ready to get into the wrestling arena one more time. And that concludes another episode of the Midnight Combo Pack. I'm glad I was able to catalog these games into the Usagi library, and I hope you stop in to give them a shot. Sign up for your Haunted Library cards today. All those who wish to participate must check into the Ghoul School and join us in looking back at the lessons that these games teach us. Today's lesson revolves around first impressions and underlying truth. Always remember that there is more to a game than its beginnings would suggest. Nothing is ever truly as it appears, and one should search for their own truth using facts and avoid the manipulations of others. But always remember that there exist those who wish to help you, and aiding your friends will always be rewarded. In any event, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, cataloging the midnight hours with video games. Remember to keep your library card renewed by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like and comment for good measure. Have a good one, everybody!
Mommy! Phil's tree is peering through the window again. Tell her to cut it before I do.
Cut my branches and I'm not giving you any more of their peaches.
And back to reality.
Oh my god, it's finally done. Hey Hope, Philip here, and that is a video that was recorded, no joke, 4 years ago. Needless to say, Zen and I are very happy to finally have it out. You might be wondering, damn, 4 years? What the hell happened, Philip? Well, you see, what ended up happening back in 2021 was that we were worried about the Danganronpa 1 video taking so long, and we didn't want to just make that video, have it come out, and then oops, we have nothing else to upload because all of our time went into Danganronpa 1, so there's nothing else in the docket for us to release. So we decided, okay, we're gonna make a whole lot of videos, like an entire backlog's worth of videos for us to release to you guys. And that, like, included in that was the previous Midnight Combo Pack on Dante and Hat in Time, the Edge of Destruction review for Doctor Who, the Transformers animated review, and just like a couple of more videos aside from that. And this video on Darksiders and Assassin's Creed was the last of those videos before Zen and I shifted focus into working on Danganronpa 2. So yeah, that's actually why it's taken this long for this video to come out. It was actually going to come out after Danganronpa 2 because all of that video has since been recorded, but I decided, you know what, Zen really wants this to come out, and I want it off my back. Not to say I don't like Assassin's Creed or Darksiders or anything, I haven't played the games. It's just that, you know, I really want to get to Danganronpa 2, and that will be the next thing that both Tifa and myself will be editing, so I hope you all look forward to that. And yeah, it's just, I'm so happy to have this done. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. It was fun in its own way in terms of editing, but I am just so ready to jump into the big Goliath of a video that is going to be Danganronpa 2. As always, if you enjoyed the video, then please do hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out a ton. And hey, if you like this format, then go check out the other episodes of Midnight Combo Pack. The first video is a little outdated as far as the editing is concerned, but I still think Zen did a great job on the analysis. And then the Dante's Inferno and a Hat in Time video I still think really holds up. As far as the next Midnight Combo Pack is concerned, we're actually planning on jumping into both Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright, so we really hope you look forward to that. Until then, she's been Zen, I've been your editor Phil, and we hope to see you again in the Haunted Gaming Library. Have a good one, everybody.
Oh, my fingers! It's not a door. It's a thing of evil.